Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and we're here. It is game week. It is Monday, Labor Day, which is the marker of many transitions for a lot of us. It's transition from a little bit from summer to fall, which, take it for what it's worth. It's also transition from, summertime, no school to sending your kids off to school. So to all the parents out there that have already done it or are about to do it, good luck for all those first timers, especially. And then it's also transition from non-football weekends to football weekends. We actually just had football this weekend, a lot of college football, a lot of stuff to watch there. And we get the NFL coming this week to a stadium near you. So the Seattle Seahawks will take on the San Francisco 49ers in Seattle this Sunday at 1:05 p.m. It all gets started now. And there's been a show I've been wanting to do for a while about the NFC West. And you guys have been along for the ride with me for a while now. You know that there are some national storylines that drive me a little bit nuts. And I figured I'd take a show to share some of the things that I believe are shared around as fact. I'm going to tell you why they're fiction. So we're going to go through some of those. That should be fun. Also have a kind of a big announcement coming up here in about 15 minutes. So we'll talk to you about that. But for now, if you haven't already given the show a like, click subscribe, please do. Give us a follow. Give us a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts so I can continue to harass Mike Salk about having a better rating. That would be really nice and appreciate all your help about that with that. So let's do it. Let's get right to it. Kind of the name of the show today, NFC West fiction. And what we're going to talk about is where people have the storyline wrong. And this isn't just Seahawks specific. This is across the NFC West. And there's certainly a little bit of a Seahawks twist to this, but let's get into it. And the first one for me that I keep hearing, even from people in and around the 49ers, that Robert Saleh is going to fix the 49ers defense. And I'll admit, this surprised me. My recollection of Robert Saleh when he led the San Francisco 49ers defense not that long ago, that they were pretty dominant. And when I went back and I looked at exactly, what went on with those teams, I found something a little bit different. And so what I did here, just to give you an idea, is if you look at the points allowed rank, the yards allowed rank for the San Francisco 49ers from the first season that Robert Saleh was the defensive coordinator until the last season that he was their defensive coordinator, at least the first go around. It was 2017 to 2020. And the reality is Robert Saleh had one top 10 defense from a points and yards perspective in his entire tenure. He only had 2 top 10 defenses from a yards perspective. He only had 1 from a points perspective all by itself. So as you go through this, and I looked, 2017, when he got there, it wasn't like the cupboard was bare from a personnel perspective. You had DeForest Buckner. You had Kwan Williams, who was a great nickel corner. You had Eric Armstead. Even back then, the Elvis Dumerville, for whatever that was worth. But you had an older version of Navarro Bowman. You had DJ Jones. You had Jimmy Ward. You had some guys back then. And when you got to 2018, you continued to have guys. You had Buckner and Armstead, and Richard Sherman joined the crew. DJ Reed was there before he had been transitioned to a cornerback. Fred Warner was there in 2018. You had some guys on that squad. And that squad still finished 28th in points allowed and 13th in yards allowed. Now, what changed in 2019? when they actually did make a jump to 8th in points allowed and 2nd in yards allowed? Well, really one thing. They drafted Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa played double-digit sacks. That helped unlock Eric Armstead, who had double-digit sacks that year as well. But most of the other players on that group, now Dre Greenlaw was a rookie that year as well, but was not the Dre Greenlaw that I think we all know now. So personnel-wise, the main difference was Nick Bosa. And kind of proof that Nick Bosa was the reason is Nick Bosa the following year only played in 2 games, had 68 snaps because he got injured in that second game, missed the rest of the season. And guess what? The 49ers went from 8th in points allowed to 17th in points allowed. And I look at that and I say, all right, so that seems less about Robert Saleh being special and more about Nick Bosa being special. And so let's take a look at what he did when he went to the New York Jets. All right. So when Robert Saleh became the head coach of the New York Jets in his first season, they had the 32nd ranked defense in points allowed and the 32nd ranked defense in yards allowed. So his first year was pretty disastrous. And if we look at, well, who was on that Jets team back in 2021? It wasn't like the cupboard was bare. John Franklin Myers, who's actually still a very good player for the Broncos. You had Quinnen Williams. You had Bryce Hall. You had Bryce Huff. Excuse me. They had Bryce Hall as well, but Bryce Huff. There were some guys on that team. CJ Mosley was on that team, and they finished dead last in points allowed and yards allowed. Well, 2022, they went from 32nd in his first year to 4th in yards allowed and points allowed, which is a remarkable jump. And I think 49ers fans might point to that and say, see, look what he can do. Well, they drafted Sauce Gardner that year, and they signed DJ Reed as a cornerback. So they had what was, at least at that time, the best cornerback duo in football. And they made this big jump. Why am I pointing this out? Partially because it's not just about coaching. It's about who you are coaching. It is about the personnel. And it's about, did you make significant moves to improve the personnel? So keep that in mind as we continue through this little tour of Robert Saleh's career. 2023, they dropped to 12th in points allowed. 2024, they dropped to 20th in points allowed. So Robert Saleh, who has a reputation now as a great defensive coach, in 8 seasons has had 2 top 10 defenses in points allowed. Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad coach, but this idea that he alone just turns everything around, let's keep talking about it. All right. So next on this Robert Saleh tour and this notion that Robert Saleh is going to fix this defense, well, let's take a look at what the defense is that he's got to fix. Last year, did you know the 49ers finished 32nd in points allowed? In fact, that's actually not true. So I don't know why that says that. Let's go back to it. It was not 32nd. They finished 29th in points allowed and 8th in yards allowed. So excuse me, I don't know how that error got in. The EPA is correct, but we'll get back to that. So they had the 29th defense in points allowed and 8th in yards allowed. 29th, though, in EPA and 25th in success rate against the rush. 29th in rush EPA, 25th in rush success rate. So point being there is that a big part of the problem on this defense last year was defending the run. And what did they do as a result of that? Well, they added Alfred Collins and CJ West in the draft. They traded for Bryce Huff, the edge player that used to play for the Jets. They drafted Michael Williams, so that's 3 rookies. And then they drafted Upton Stout. There's a 4th rookie. And that's great. We'll talk about the implications there in a second. But if you look at this, who did they lose? They lost Charvarius Ward, who was a starting corner. So at best, they've replaced one starting corner with another starting corner, this time a rookie, in Upton Stout. They lost Javon Hargrave, who was a really poor run defender, but was a good pass rusher. They lost Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. You could have another whole fiction item on here that, well, it doesn't really matter that they lost Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga because those guys didn't really play last year. Well, here's the thing. The problem with that logic is when the last time the 49ers weren't good last year. The last time the 49ers defense was good, they had Talanoa Hufanga playing all-pro level. They had Dre Greenlaw playing near all-pro level. And by the way, they didn't just lose those guys. Over the years, they've lost to Forrest Buckner and Eric Armstead and DJ Jones and Aziz Al-Shaair. And the question is, have they replaced those guys with anybody that is playing at their level? Not even whether they're good, but are they? Talanoa Hufanga was an impact player from the moment he stepped on the field. Do they have that now with his replacement? I don't think that they do. And interestingly, you could say, well, look, when they drafted Nick Bosa, when they drafted Sauce Gardner and added DJ Reed, Saleh was able to really make big changes on the defenses that he was responsible for. My question to you is, did they make any move equivalent with adding all-pro rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year in both cases? Do you think Mykel Williams, CJ West, or Alfred Collins is going to be a defensive rookie of the year candidate and a perennial all-pro? That's a different question than are they good or can they be a good player? You're talking about, are they a blue chip from the get-go? I don't know that there's a case to be made that any of those guys are blue chips anytime soon, and maybe ever. And to give you some idea, I went back and I looked. If the rush defense was such a problem for the 49ers, I went back and looked and said, well, how many rookies on the defensive interior in the last 5 years have come out and had solid run defense rookie years? And I'm going to say, I looked at run stop rates, but let's talk just PFF grades for simplicity. Over 70 run defense grade, over 60. Let's just say over 60. That's like basically an average player. Well, over the last 5 seasons, there have been exactly five rookie defensive tackles who had run defense grades over 60. 5. There have only been, 8, 10, 15 that have even had 500 snaps in their rookie seasons. So you had 15 defensive tackles in the last 5 years that had at least 500 snaps, and only 5 of those had run defense grades over 60. Only like 2 of them had it over 70. So you're talking about like Tavondre Sweat, Jalen Carter, Kobe Turner. Are any of these guys that they added the next Jalen Carter? Does anyone think that any of them are the next Jalen Carter? Even Tavondre Sweat, who was an elite run defender right away. I'm not sure. I don't see that. And so for me, this one pretty clearly falls under the fiction category. I don't think you can assume Robert Saleh is going to fix this defense. Now, I got an exciting thing to talk to you about before we get to our next topic here on Fact or Fiction. We are partnering the entire season with Sleeper. The Sleeper app, if you don't know it, you should. It is, it's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users played fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers real-time updates, live stats, visualization of all the stats. There's a news feed. You can get updates on what's going on about your favorite players. They even show some of my stuff on there sometimes. There's also real-time chat. You can engage with other users about specific plays, players, performances during the NFL season, NBA season, Major League Baseball, whatever it is you're into. So you want to download this app. I've got it. I'm going to show you some stuff later this week. We'll be talking about it all the time. Really excited to talk about it. We're going to talk about some of the opportunities, the choices you can make around Seahawks players right now for the Seahawks versus 49ers game. But the exciting thing is, if you use promo code Hawks, you will get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And folks, we're going to have a lot of fun with this year. So check out Sleeper. Check out the description of the video. You'll get all the information you need to take advantage. And we'll talk about the picks I have coming up here in future episodes. All right, let's get back to it. So we talked about Robert Saleh fixing the defense as being a point of fiction. Let's go to the next one. All right. Sticking with the 49ers, since it's a 49er versus Seahawks week, there's this national perspective of, well, Christian McCaffrey's back. CMC is just going to fix the offense. If Saleh is going to fix the defense, CMC is going to fix the offense. And keep in mind, everybody pretty much, whether you're looking at betting lines, whether you're looking at analysts, everyone has the 49ers as the clear division favorites. This is part of the reason. They just expect Saleh to fix the defense and CMC to fix the offense. Well, let's take a look at that offense. First of all, if you look at last year, the 49ers were 11th in EPA on offense, 12th in success rate, 4th in yards, 7th in yards per carry. None of those are particularly awful numbers. Now, if you compare them to the previous year, where they were kind of a historic offense in how efficient they were first in EPA. They were first in success rate. So you go from the number one overall offense in that regard to the 11th or 12th best offense, at least from an efficiency standpoint. That's a drop, but it's not like they were in the 20s. For yards, they went from being second in yards on offense in 2023 to 4th. So not much of a change, to be honest, in terms of the yardage. Running the football, yards per carry, they went from 4th to 7th. Also not much of a change. So it's not like there's as much room to make up on the offense. And the reality is that the offense was not what really was losing them games last year. It was a combination of erosion of efficiency on offense, but it was also that defense that we just talked about. Well, as we kind of go through this, what are the key factors on that offense that has made it so lethal over the last, since Kyle Shanahan joined in 2017? I think Trent Williams is the number one part of that offense that makes it run. And if you look at the last 3 years, there is a degradation going on in how Trent Williams is playing. He was the best player in football 2 years ago, 2022, had a 93 rating as a PFF player, by far the best on offensive line, had 871 snaps, which is a lot. It's not 1,000, but it's a lot. 2023, a little bit of a dip. Goes from 93 to 89.9 as his PFF rating. His snaps erode a little bit from 871 to 809. And then last year, the 37-year-old player starts to show his age. He drops to his lowest grade in almost a decade, 85.6, which is still very good, but he started to show some wear. His snap count went from 809 to 649. That's the lowest amount of snaps he's ever played as a 49er. And so what you're betting on as a person who's coming up with this analysis that CMC is all that was missing is that Trent Williams is either going to go into the fountain of youth and be better at age 37 than he was at age 36, or that he's not as critical of a part of this offense as I believe him to be. If you think that's the case, take a look at the times and the San Francisco record when Trent Williams hasn't played. I'm not sure they've won a game in the last 3 years when Trent Williams has not played. And if they have, I think it's one of those like end of the year kind of doesn't matter types of games. So let's keep looking. It's not just Trent Williams. Deebo Samuel, who, he's become kind of a punchline as a chubby wide receiver, not that fast, over the hill, all these things. That's fine. But this is a guy that had 5,900 yards, more than that actually, of scrimmage yards since he came into the league. There's also 42 touchdowns that he scored since he came into the league. If you look over the last, 2 years or so, he had over 4,300 total yards. That was more than, I'm just double checking my results here, but there was basically only 20 players that had more total yards than he did. Deebo Samuel has been as productive as A.J. Brown or Mike Evans or Terry McLaurin or Stephon Diggs. And from a touchdowns perspective, this is a guy that has had some pretty big years. Had just in 2023, he had 12 touchdowns. In 2021, he had 14 touchdowns. And so again, there's this notion of, well, he wasn't good, so they won't miss him. Similar to the Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga thing. Well, they didn't play, so they won't miss them. But when Deebo Samuel was good, the 49ers were better. And who have they replaced him with? Who is going to have that kind of production? Who's going to have a 1,700-yard total yard season with 14 touchdowns like he did in 2021? Who's going to have a 1,200-yard season with 12 touchdowns like he did in 2023? Who's replacing him? Yes, he wasn't that good last year, but he still had 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. So let's talk about that. Who is going to replace him? Well, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings. You'd hope that they would be a big part of this. Brandon Ayuk's going to be out for roughly half the year, you hope, if you're a 49ers fan. Maybe you get him back a little bit sooner. But Brandon Ayuk was not the same Brandon Ayuk when he played last year before this serious knee injury. And if you look at Brandon Ayuk's game logs from last season, this guy had how many 100-yard games out of 7 starts? Try 1. In fact, how many games did he have with over 50 yards receiving while he was healthy last year? Try 1. How many touchdown receptions did he have last year in the 7 games he played? How about 0? So Brandon Ayuk already was not Brandon Ayuk when he came back last year. And you're talking about a guy that when the 49ers were really taking off, in 2022, he had 1,000 yards receiving. 2023, he had 1,300 yards receiving and was one of the best receivers in football. He also had 15 touchdowns between those 2 years. So he's not coming back anytime soon. And when he does come back, I don't think you know what he's going to be. So let's talk about Juwan Jennings, who absolutely stepped up last year. Juwan Jennings stepped up, but Juwan Jennings may not be a 49er anymore. He is currently injured with a calf injury and also wanting to be traded or get a new contract. And they're in a protracted stare down between the two sides. So does Juwan Jennings actually play? Does he not? If he does, let's be honest. Juwan Jennings, while he did step up last year, had 975 yards and 6 touchdowns, partially because he got 113 targets. Deebo Samuel, one of the things that was always beneficial about his career was he didn't need to be a heavily targeted guy all the time in order to be productive. he had plenty of times where he had targets in the 80s, low 90s. And still, because he could carry the ball, because he was a yards after catch guy, he still turned a little bit into a lot. So Juwan Jennings, is he going to be as productive once you have Brandon Ayuk back? I don't know. I wouldn't guess yes. And if he is, that's going to take away something from Ayuk. And the other question is whether he's coming back. I don't think we know that. So who do we know that's on that team? Well, I think you're left with Ricky Pearsall and some dudes at the receiver position. It's not talking about George Kittle, because George Kittle's George Kittle. He's a constant. But guess what? You had George Kittle last year, and he played almost every game, and he had over 1,000 yards. And he's also 31. So I don't think there's a case to be made that George Kittle is going to be better or make up for all the ground that was lost by these other guys. And what you're basically counting on is that Ricky Pearsall is going to be a 1,200-yard receiver with 12 touchdowns this year. Like, you need him to be that good. And you need one of these other guys like Sky Moore, Russell Gage, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You need somebody else to show up, and be a guy. Right now, that receiver room is Ricky Pearsall. That's what it is. And so I think this is another one that pretty clearly is fiction. Christian McCaffrey coming back, we don't even know if Christian McCaffrey is going to be Christian McCaffrey, but let's say he is. There's a lot of other aspects of this 49ers offense that is not what it once was. And there's a lot you're going to have to get right in order for this to fall the right way for San Francisco. Let's keep going. We're not going to just pick on the 49ers. We'll pick on some other guys. One of my favorite tropes that's out there is, oh man, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, they just have this division on lock. Those guys, they're far and away the best coaches. Really? Well, Mike Macdonald, in his first season ever coaching against these guys, period, like first year coaching as a head coach, period, and then also in this division, he finished with the best division record, 4-2. And there's a very strong case to be made that it should have been 5-1. And the first time he played Sean McVay with the Seahawks as the Seahawks head coach, his team delivered a performance that has only happened one other time in Sean McVay's history. They held him to 13 points in regulation on offense. And you say, well, they had 20 points. Well, that was a red zone pick six that Geno Smith threw. That's not a defensive issue. That is an offensive issue. So we'll talk about what the offense did. 13 points in regulation. And held them to 7 3-and-outs. That's only happened one other time. 3 of 13 on third downs. And like I said, this only happened in one other game in Sean McVay's entire head coaching career. Mike Macdonald did it the first time he faced him as a Seahawks head coach. People are going to say, well, the Rams went on to win that game. Yeah, they did. It wasn't because Sean McVay and Matt Stafford unlocked something. This was because a million other things went wrong, which we won't get into right now. But don't get it twisted. Matt Stafford in regulation was 22 of 41 in that game. 22 of 41, 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Had a passer rating in the 70s. So Sean McVay was in a bottle, and so was Matt Stafford for that game. He also locked down Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy in the second game that they played. Allowed 17 points, 149 passing yards, 277 total yards in San Francisco. That's only happened twice in Kyle Shanahan's tenure at home. So, in fact, they only allowed 3.5 yards per play on first down. That was the lowest of the season for San Francisco and one of the lowest in the career of Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. So we can talk about, yes, the Shanahan and Purdy blew out the Seahawks and Mike McDonald's defense the first time they played last year. That's legit. But guess what? That was the game where Mike McDonald changed over all personnel afterwards. That is where they traded for Roy Robertson Harris. They eventually got Ernest Jones. They eventually changed out Rayshon Jenkins, who was a problem in that game, for Kobe Bryant. They started playing Josh Jobe at corner. All of these changes started to be made personnel-wise. And so that when he had his personnel and they were playing his defense by the second half of the season, Shanahan and Purdy had nothing to say about it. We're going to talk about a little bit more on this because this isn't the first time Mike McDonald faced Brock Purdy. In fact, when he faced Brock Purdy with the Ravens in 2023, dominated him there. And if you look at Purdy's 3 performances against Mike McDonald defenses, he is 57 of 88. It's a 64% completion rate, averages 223 yards per game, has thrown 4 touchdowns and 5 interceptions for a 79.2 rating. That includes the first game last year where he went against the personnel that Mike McDonald changed out. And in that game, he threw for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions and 255 yards. So if you look at just the games when Mike McDonald's actually had his personnel playing his defense in Baltimore and in Seattle, Purdy's gone 39 of 60 for 414 yards, which works out to, a little over 200 yards per game, has thrown 1 touchdown and 5 picks for a 55.8 rating. So this isn't the first time that Mike McDonald has shown a propensity to frustrate Kyle Shanahan and his favorite child, Brock Purdy. And he's not the only one. Jonathan Gannon. This is the coach of the Cardinals, who is probably the least known coach, I would bet, maybe in the NFL, potentially. Like, most people just don't know him. A lot of analysts do, but I think people forget the Cardinals had the highest point differential in the division last year. They were plus 21. In fact, only the Seahawks and the Cardinals had positive point differentials last year. The Rams that won the division had a negative point differential. No one ever will ever mention that. The Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon, they outscored Sean McVay and the Rams 50-23 last year. They absolutely whooped him the first time, and they lost the second time. But the only time they lost was 13-9 in LA when a touchdown bounced off the face of Trey McBride in the end zone and turned into an interception. And that was a game that meant nothing for the Cardinals, meant everything to the Rams. So I don't think you can say Sean McVay and the Rams did anything close to locking down the Cardinals last year. Guess what? They also swept the 49ers. They won both games against San Francisco. And in those games, Brock Purdy had a combined 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a 62.1 passer rating. So are we sure that it's Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan that have this division on lock and have their teams going in the right direction? I think that's fiction. So add that to the list of things that people are getting wrong nationally. If you haven't already, make sure you click like and click subscribe. Would love to have you as part of the crew. Make sure you go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get access to ad-free audio from this show, as well as access to the Discord channel, be able to hang out there, and get verified over at HBTix, hbtix.com. There are tons of Seahawks 49ers seats available there. Sell your Seahawks tickets to Seahawks fans on HBTix. Buy your tickets from Seahawks fans on HBTix. Head over there. Let's see you at the game. Let's get as many Seahawks butts in seats Seahawks fans' butts in seats as possible for this weekend. And by the way, again, I take no fees. I take no cost. In fact, this costs me money to run it every month. So please spread the word, get over to HBTix, HBTIX, and get to a Seahawks game as a Seahawks fan. All right. There are some other fiction items that I want to get into, but I'm not going to go quite as deep visually, at least, with these. There's this notion that the Rams, who had a pretty terrible run defense last year. This is a team that, if you don't know, for all the love that the pass rush gets, deservedly so, that is not fiction. The Rams pass rush is the best young pass rush in football. I don't think there's a question. Maybe the Packers might argue now with their addition, but that's my general read. Well, they weren't so good in defending. Well, frankly, they weren't that great at defending the pass, to be honest. They were a good pass rushing team, but they were 26th in passing touchdowns allowed, 20th in passing yards allowed. So they struggled there. But let's talk about the rush defense. They were 22nd in rushing yards allowed, 26th in yards per attempt. And if we get into EPA, let's take a quick look at EPA. We'll do this in real time. We look at last season. You're talking about a Rams team that was 20th in rush EPA. And 20th in rush success rate. So not good. Well, the big move that they made to improve their run defense is signing Poona Ford. Seahawks fans know Poona Ford. Poona Ford was a really good nose tackle last year for the Chargers. He's been an okay player other years. But they're replacing Bobby Brown, who is also a pretty good player at nose tackle, signed for a big contract in Carolina. So you're not going from terrible to good. You're going from good to pretty good, like better, above, probably a little bit better than Bobby Brown. And what else? You think that one nose tackle solves Braden Fisk's problems in defending the run? Solves other players' problems on that roster defending the run? That feels like a pretty bold assumption. And for me, I'll have to see it to believe it. I think that that's a big, that is a big projection. I'm looking here quickly at other players on the Rams roster from last year. Jared Verse was a great run defender and will continue to be. I have no doubt about it. But they've got Braden Fisk, who's not a great run defender. You got Michael Hoyt, who was a big part of their defense, who left and is no longer there. So yeah, we'll see if this Rams run defense is just better because of Poona Ford. The other one was Matt Stafford being great in 2024. And this one, there's a lot to cover on this one, but Matt Stafford had his lowest touchdown total in 2024 since 2012. His lowest touchdown total since 2012. This Rams, he was among quarterbacks, he was 15th last year in EPA per play. He was 16th in EPA plus completion percentage over expected, CPOE. So by those metrics, you're talking about a middle of the pack quarterback. This is a guy that had the thing that he did better last year than he had done in previous years was that he reduced his interception rate. His interception rate was among his best of his career. I think it was around 1 point. I'll look it up here. It was 1.5%. In fact, that was the lowest. The lowest of his career. But his touchdown rate also dipped. And you're talking about a guy that had a 93.7 passer rating which is not super efficient, partially because his yards per attempt dropped. It was just over 7, and his touchdowns were not great. So Matt Stafford was, by his metrics, not particularly good in 2024. In fact, I went back and I looked at this. If you take out two games, the games that he played against, actually 3 games. You take out the game played against Minnesota, New England, and Buffalo. Those were 3 excellent games that he played, and they were Matt Stafford level games. But you take out just 3 games out of the season that he played. What you end up with is a guy who completed 64% of his passes, threw for 2,800 yards, had 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and an 84.7 passer rating. In those other 3 games, he had 135.5 passer rating. He was amazing. 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. Those came in 3 games. But the balance of his season, the vast majority of his season, Matt Stafford was a below average quarterback in the NFL. And while everybody does the opposite with Sam Darnold and says, well, you know what? Sam Darnold, he's nothing because of his last 2 games. He didn't play well. So he's just nothing. Forget the last 14 or 15 games where he was an MVP caliber player just last year. Everyone's asking you to do the same thing in kind of the inverse with Matt Stafford, which is, hey, his last 2 games of the season were really good. Forget the fact that he was not a good quarterback for the majority of the year. So Matt Stafford was, I think, criminally underrated in 2023, where he was an MVP level quarterback. And I think he was criminally overrated in 2024. If you look at the numbers, you have to do some gymnastics to actually come up with some way to say that was a good season for Matt Stafford. Another point of fiction out there, this notion that Sam Darnold struggled under pressure. We've talked about this one a lot, so I am not going to go back through all of it. But here's the thing. Sam Darnold, when he was under pressure, he led the NFL in touchdown passes under pressure. He had 13, tied with Joe Burrow. Let's say that again. The quarterback who led the NFL in touchdown passes when under pressure was Sam Darnold. He did the same thing that Joe Burrow did last year. I don't think anyone says Joe Burrow is bad under pressure. Sam Darnold had the 6th best passer rating when under pressure in the NFL last year. By comparison, Brock Purdy, 17th. Kyler Murray, 25th. Matt Stafford, 33rd. There were 32 quarterbacks with enough snaps to beat Matt Stafford in passer rating when under pressure. How do you think Matt Stafford's going to do under pressure when he's got a bad back like he's dealing with going into this season? And while we're on the Sam Darnold piece, there's a few others I didn't even list here that I want to go back to. One of them is that Brock Purdy's a clutch quarterback, or that Matt Stafford's the only good clutch quarterback, because pressure can mean different things. Generally, people think about it as when you're under pass pressure, but there's also close and late situations. I've talked about this quite a bit. But since 2022, so the last 3 years, in situations where the game is within 1 score, it's within 8 points one way or the other, so a single score, and it's within 5 minutes to go at the end of the 4th quarter or overtime, Matt Stafford leads the division with 4 touchdowns in that period over 3 years. Sam Darnold's only started 1 season in that period of time. He has 3 touchdowns in those situations. So he has only 1 fewer in massively fewer opportunities. How many does Kyler Murray have? He has 0. He has 5 interceptions in those moments, but 0 touchdowns. Brock Purdy, how many touchdowns does he have in close and late? 0. He has 3 interceptions. So combined, Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy in close and late situations over the last 3 years, 0 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Is anyone telling anyone else about that? Is that something that anyone talks about when they talk about the quarterbacks in this division? And again, you go to passer rating in those moments. We talked about passer rating under pressure. This is passer rating in close and late. Sam Darnold led the NFL last year in passer rating, 135.6. Matt Stafford did pretty well. He had a 90 rating. It's not great, but it's not bad. Brock Purdy was a 49.6. 49.6. Kyler Murray was worse. He was 34.7 in close and late situations. And this other thing, I'm getting off on a tangent here because these aren't all listed. I'll get back to some of the things that were listed there. But this notion that Sam Darnold had a perfect situation in Minnesota, that this is absolutely national fiction, that everything that Sam Darnold did last year was a product of his surroundings. Well, that would generally imply the best friend of a quarterback is a good running game. That takes a lot of pressure off any quarterback. Well, the Vikings had the 22nd ranked run offense in EPA per play. They were 18th in success rate. That's not a good run offense. Oh, but they had such a better offensive line than the Seahawks have. We'll talk about this in a 2-part way. 1, Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, was out after 7 games. He after week 8, he didn't play. They were 27th in the NFL in pass block efficiency over the season. And guess what? Sam Darnold was under more pressure last year than Geno Smith. He had a 39% pressure rate. Geno Smith had a 37% pressure rate. So are we sure Sam Darnold had such a perfect situation in Minnesota? It doesn't seem perfect to me. And then we take that into this notion that the Seahawks offensive line is bad. This one, we can't prove one way or another. So I can't really say that it is fiction until we get into the season. But here's the thing I will say is fiction. People talk about Abe Lucas like he's not a big difference. Like they're like, he's hurt all the time. Well, if you don't think that Stone Forsythe and Mike Jarrell and the guys they were running out at right tackle last year were a significant difference than what Abe Lucas is when he's on the field, honestly, like, I don't know what football you've watched. On the offensive line, Gray Zabel. There's people that still talk about, well, he played against smaller college competition. How's he going to do in the NFL? We'll see. I think he's going to do pretty darn well. And early indications are that's the case. Charles Cross already made a jump. That nationally, people do give him credit for being a good player. But people nationally don't know Jalen Sundell at center. They don't know what he's capable of. They don't know that he's a better athlete than almost any center. They don't know that his athletic profile is comparable to Creed Humphreys. I'm not saying that he's going to be Creed Humphrey, but he is a similar athlete statistically to Creed Humphrey. They don't know that the offensive line, it's not just a matter of whether it's good or bad talent-wise. It's what you're asking them to do. And the percentage of pass plays that they were asked to deal with last year as a young offensive line is going to be vastly different than the number of dropbacks they're going to have to deal with this year. The total lack of play action last year, the total lack of movement of the pocket, bootlegs, changing the launch point, changing where the rusher is going to have to go to get to the quarterback, changing the coordination between run and pass, where last year Ryan Grubb would call play action on plays where they never ran that as a running play. So defenses never had to really honor it because it was never going to be a run. You'd watch linebackers just stand still when the Seahawks would run play action last year because they were tipping their pitches. There is a massive difference between what not only the Seahawks offensive line talent last year to this year, the coaching from last year to this year, the scheme from last year to this year, and the health. There's a ton of differences, and nationally, you wouldn't know any of that. Last thing I'd say here is that this notion out there that the Seahawks are short on receiving. Now, this is an interesting one because the reality is it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then I think question marks. Even Cooper Kupp is a question mark. And I think people stop at that because they have the name receiver in their title, their position description. Well, tight ends are also receivers, and so are running backs. And this tight end group with A.J. Barner and with Elijah Arroyo is going to be a lot more productive than people realize. People don't know those guys and don't know what to expect. They also don't know that Clint Kubiak's offense last year, second leading receiver was the tight end. The tight end gets used very heavily in this offense. We just talked about George Kittle not that long ago, best tight end in football. You see how much he's been utilized down in the Shanahan offense, which Kubiak is familiar with. I'm not saying A.J. Barner is going to be George Kittle. I'm not saying Elijah Arroyo is going to be Travis Kelce. But they're going to get a lot more opportunities than people realize. And instead of just looking at the receiver room, they should be considering what the Seahawks have at the tight end spot. I would guess they still would not have a lot of respect for it, but I don't think it's nearly the challenge that other people do. The other is that the running back gets a lot of receptions in this offense. Have you heard of Christian McCaffrey? We talked about him a while ago. Yeah, he is targeted quite a bit. Alvin Kamara was targeted a lot last year in Clint Kubiak's offense. And both Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker are excellent receiving targets out of the backfield. So I think you can honestly say, okay, the receiver room has some question marks, but Torrey Horton may be a surprise positive as much as maybe Cooper Kupp is not as great as he used to be. And maybe the ironic thing here is I think expectations are relatively low for Cooper Kupp, at least within the Seahawks community. But a big problem for him is being healthy. Well, he's entering the season. He hasn't missed a snap in practice. He's been there the whole time. He seems perfectly healthy. We'll see if that lasts. But if health was the major issue for him, he might be in for a rebound year. He's not. People talk about Cooper Kupp like he's 38, like he's Trent Williams, like he's Matt Stafford. He's in his low 30s. So Cooper Kupp's in great shape. He's healthy. Who knows what he's capable of? So I think the combination of JSN, Torrey Horton, potentially what we see from Cooper Kupp, A.J. Barner, Elijah Arroyo, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. I think if you stack up that group of receiving targets against all the others in the NFL by halfway through the season, I don't know if anyone's going to say the Seahawks are short on receiving targets. So there is a bunch of fiction floating around out there, and I had to expose some of it, honestly. The stuff about Robert Saleh is not backed by evidence. The stuff about CMC is not backed by evidence. The notion about the coaching disparity in this division is not backed by evidence, at least recent evidence. And there's so much fiction about Sam Darnold. There's so much fiction about Matt Stafford. It's all out there. And the best part of all that is that means the Seahawks are underdogs this week. And I will pull this up. I looked it up previously. So they're still, make sure it's still the case. They are 2.5-point underdogs. Yep, 2.5-point underdogs. They still opened at 1.5 points. And let me tell you, the last time that the Seahawks, let's talk about all the times that the Seahawks were 2.5-point underdogs at home in the first game of the season. It's happened only 2 times. 2 times in the last 35 years. Honestly, in the last 45 years, like all the way back to 1985. So what would that be? Like 40 years, 30 years? I think it's 40 years. Yeah, 40 years. It's only happened 2 times. The Seahawks won both of those games, by the way. Last time it happened was 2022 against Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos, who were 6.5-point favorites. Seahawks beat them 17-16. The other time was Pete Carroll's first game as a Seahawk against the San Francisco 49ers and Mr. Harbaugh. They were 3-point favorites over the Seahawks, and the Seahawks beat them 31-6. One last thing on this. The 49ers, they have, let me make sure I've got this right. When the 49ers have played on the road in the first game of the season, and they have been favored by at least 2.5 points. Last time it happened was 2010. It's happened 4 times since the year 2000. So since the NFC West was newly formed, it's happened 3 times in that period of time. And it's happened 4 times since 2000. In those situations, they're 1-3. They're 1-3. So we'll see. We will see what's coming up here this week. I've got a lot of stuff planned for you guys this week. Obviously, it's game week. I'll be talking to Mike McDonald later today for the start of the week press conference. We'll be talking to the coordinators, to Sam Darnold, all that stuff. We'll get into the locker room. I'll check in with all those guys. Make sure you're liked and subscribed. I want to welcome Coffee Hawk, who's become a new member on YouTube. Welcome to the party. Welcome to the crew. And then Matt in Beaverton has a super chat. Fact or fake, Cup is washed. The national media believes that. What have your eyes told you? I'm not willing to say that's fiction yet. And that's no offense to Cooper Kupp, not meant to be. I need to see it. I have not seen anything that makes me think Cooper Kupp is a difference-making player so far. But I also acknowledge that he has never been an athletic demon. Like, he's not someone that just jumps out in that way. He's a very savvy player. He makes plays when it counts, and he's been a great red zone target. So I'm not willing to either really support the notion that he is washed, and I'm not willing to support the notion that he isn't. That one's I've got to see. And I'll try to be honest. When I feel like I don't have enough information, I'll say that. And with the Cooper Kupp thing, I don't know. I just don't know yet. I have to see it to really have more context there. All right, everybody. That will do it for this Monday, Labor Day edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Thank you all for joining, all the thousands of you. It's amazing. Have a great holiday if you celebrate it. Barbecue, whatever you're going to do. And we might have more content later. But make sure you check out the Sleeper app. The description is in the video. Description of the video. You want to use code HAWKS. That will get you up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use of details. Currently operational over 25 states. Check out the Sleeper app today. I think you will have fun with it. I certainly do. All right, everybody, take care. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been your Monday episode of Hawk Blogger Morning.